Elsa, a nursing student about to graduate, was spending her final year's summer break. As part of a program at her school, students were given the opportunity to work in a hospital during their final year and receive compensation, going beyond just an internship. Of course, they worked as students and were not assigned to handle critical emergencies, but rather simple and light tasks. Due to the hospital's chronic understaffing, having students help with the workload was a significant aid. During this year of work, Elsa was assigned to the geriatric ward, where she primarily assisted with basic tasks such as assisting with mobility, changing clothes, and bathing. These responsibilities were relatively relaxed compared to other duties. Among the many elderly patients, one stood out in particular, whom we'll refer to as Grandma A. For some reason, Grandma A and Elsa had an instant connection. Perhaps it was because of Grandma A's condition, as she couldn't remember many things, often forgetting what had just happened. She was also frequently dissatisfied with the service provided by other nurses, often complaining, though she would forget about it soon after. Although these complaints were merely fleeting, they could be a bit annoying at times. However, somehow, Grandma A and Elsa got along very well. From their first encounter, Grandma A felt like Elsa was her granddaughter and would always address her as such. Elsa understood Grandma A's situation and would spend time chatting with her to keep her company and alleviate her boredom. If Grandma A had any specific needs or noticed any issues, Elsa would inform the other nurses. However, Grandma A's hospitalization was actually for a surgical procedure. When the doctors deemed her condition stable, they scheduled the surgery for the following day. Elsa knew that Grandma A's surgery was in the morning, so she went to see her that day, holding her hand and encouraging her, assuring her that everything would be fine. However, Grandma A was genuinely afraid of the surgery. She said she couldn't go through with it and feared the outcome. Clinging tightly to Elsa's hand, she hoped that Elsa would accompany her into the operating room. Elsa told her she couldn't, as she would wait outside and wake her up as soon as she regained consciousness. However, Grandma A refused to let go, continuing to tightly grip Elsa's hand. Soon enough, the actual time for the surgery arrived and other nurses came to assist, pushing Grandma A towards the operating room. Elsa stayed by her side throughout the journey because Grandma A held onto her hand so tightly. As they reached the entrance of the operating room, many people urged Grandma A to let go and allow Elsa to proceed with her own duties. However, Grandma A remained fearful and continued to hold on to Elsa's hand. Given that the surgery required multiple people to work together, Grandma A's reluctance to let go could cause complications. The doctor said to her, "All right, Grandma, I'll let your granddaughter accompany you during the surgery, but she needs to perform some cleaning and changing of clothes first. Can you release her hand for now? She'll come back, and you can hold hands again for the surgery." When Grandma A heard this, she happily agreed and thanked the doctor. As a result, Elsa indeed proceeded with the cleaning and changing of clothes, but her sole purpose was to hold Grandma A's hand. Later, as Grandma A caught sight of her, she continued to grasp Elsa's hand and entered the operating room. For Elsa, this experience was profound. As a nursing student, she typically cared for patients, but this time she directly entered the operating room alongside Grandma A, making it an exceptional and impactful experience. Throughout the surgery, as Grandma A was under general anesthesia and unconscious, she never released her grip on Elsa's hand, holding it tightly. The surgery lasted for 6 to 7 hours, but it was ultimately successful. After the procedure, it took the assistance of 2 nurses to pry open Grandma A's fingers and allow Elsa to retrieve her hand. On that day, Elsa's sole responsibility was to accompany Grandma A into the operating room and wait until she emerged. Standing for an extended period left Elsa feeling exceptionally fatigued. Once Elsa returned home after her shift, she was so exhausted that she immediately went to bed after having dinner. Elsa fell into a deep slumber and had a peculiar dream. In her dream, she found herself back at the hospital and ascended to the rooftop. On the open rooftop, she heard Grandma A's voice calling out to her. Grandma A said, "A granddaughter, save me." Elsa looked around, following Grandma A's voice as she searched for her. She saw Grandma A's hand clutching the rooftop railing, her body hanging outside the edge. If Elsa didn't hold on tightly, Grandma A would plummet. Swiftly, Elsa ran over and crossed the railing, extending her hands to tightly grasp Grandma A's hands. Grandma A continued pleading, "A granddaughter, save me. They're trying to pull me down. You can't let go." Elsa adjusted her position, gripping Grandma A's arm slightly higher, allowing them to hold onto each other more securely. Using the rooftop railing as support, Elsa strained to pull Grandma A up. However, she discovered that Grandma A's feet were entangled in something. It was then that she had the opportunity to glimpse the scene outside the hospital. She was astonished to find that the familiar streets had transformed into a dark, viscous ocean, churning like thick sesame paste. Many hands emerged from the water, trying to drag Grandma down. As Elsa exerted herself to bring Grandma A up, she encountered tremendous resistance. The black hands entangling Grandma A's feet increased the difficulty of the rescue. Nevertheless, Elsa's heart had only one thought: she must never let go. Elsa fought against the black hands, unwavering and determined. She used her feet to brace against the bottom of the railing, channeling all her strength. Eventually, she succeeded in pulling Grandma A back to safety. Grandma A collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, while Elsa touched her own hand, feeling the pain endured while tightly holding on to Grandma A. Her hand bore a few red marks. As Elsa let out a sigh of relief, a sudden gust of wind blew in from outside the hospital, whisking away her nurse cap and scattering her hair. In the wind, a voice spoke to her, saying, "Don't interfere in matters that are none of your business." After hearing the voice, Elsa woke up abruptly from her dream. As she regained consciousness, she noticed that her hand bore the same finger marks as in her dream, leaving her puzzled. As a nurse, she couldn't explain why such marks would suddenly appear. However, due to the unsettling feeling the dream had left her with, she decided to visit Grandma A at the hospital as soon as possible. Upon returning to the hospital, Elsa was informed by her colleagues that Grandma A had experienced a dangerous situation last night, but fortunately, she had managed to hold on and was now out of danger. Elsa headed to Grandma A's room and found her awake, albeit looking weak. Grandma A told Elsa that she had always known Elsa wasn't her granddaughter, but because she missed her own family dearly, she had acted that way. She expressed immense gratitude for Elsa's enduring tolerance and assistance, as Elsa had been her sole source of emotional support in the hospital. After Grandma A finished speaking, Elsa comforted her, telling her not to talk like that and to rest a little more before discussing it further. Then Elsa returned to the nursing station to organize some documents. It was then that a senior nurse, who was usually quiet and had graduated 2 years ahead of Elsa, sat next to her and pointed at the bruises on Elsa's hand, asking if she had also had the same dream. Elsa was astonished and couldn't understand what she meant, as she hadn't mentioned her dream to anyone, so no one should know about it. Seeing Elsa's confusion, the senior nurse continued explaining the dream about the hospital rooftop. As Elsa listened, she asked in surprise how the nurse knew about it. The senior nurse paused for a moment and began recounting how she had also had the same dream when she first started working but hadn't been able to hold onto the patient, and the next morning, the patient had actually passed away. After finishing her story, the senior nurse still appeared uneasy and saddened. She gently patted Elsa's hand and told her to keep striving, but to remember that not every rescue would be successful, and she should also take care of her own safety. Then she stood up and left the station. As she walked away, Elsa remained deep in thought. She couldn't comprehend the meaning behind the senior nurse's final words. It reminded her of the previous dream and the voice that told her not to meddle. Elsa started pondering whether these occurrences had some sort of connection, but she also realized that she couldn't control such events. If a similar situation were to arise again, she would have to rely on her quick thinking and adaptability. However, she quickly set aside her doubts. Grandma A's recovery was progressing well, and after over a week in the hospital, she was finally ready to be discharged. Before Grandma A left, she made a special visit to the nursing station to find Elsa, holding her hand and expressing gratitude for all the care she had received. In that moment, Elsa felt warmth in her heart and sensed that she was suited for this profession. As Grandma A's family arrived to pick her up, they all entered the elevator together to leave. Elsa smiled and waved goodbye to her. Just as they were about to depart, a voice whispered in Elsa's ear, "Don't meddle in things that don't concern you." Carl, the protagonist of our story, is an avid photographer and traveler with a passion for capturing moments through his lens. He often ventures to different locations, capturing a wide range of subjects, be it people or landscapes. On this particular trip, he found himself in a historic city in mainland China, hoping to capture some incredible photographs during his journey. One day, while exploring the city and taking pictures, Carl stumbled upon a bustling flea market. The market was brimming with all sorts of items, and as he strolled along, he noticed a stall displaying a collection of vintage goods. Among them, an antique lighter caught his eye. This particular lighter required lighter fluid to function, reminiscent of the popular Zippo brand. Given Carl's interest in all things retro, this antique lighter naturally intrigued him. Engaging in conversation with the stall owner, Carl inquired about the price, which turned out to be quite reasonable. Even if the lighter wasn't a valuable antique, the price seemed fair for a functional piece. Moreover, the unique style of the lighter, with its distinct local craftsmanship and intricate engravings, made it a worthwhile item for Carl's collection. Given his own smoking habit, he often collected lighters, typically favoring the familiar Zippo brand. However, this particular style, manufactured locally, had its own charm. Carl considered it to be a valuable addition to his collection and made the purchase. After completing his purchase, Carl continued his sightseeing and photography endeavors, completely forgetting about the lighter until he returned to his hotel in the evening. Upon arriving at his room and setting down his belongings, he prepared for a shower. Despite being a smoker, Carl had a peculiar habit of not enjoying the smell of smoke in his room. Therefore, he never smoked indoors. Before entering the bathroom, he decided to have a cigarette, allowing the smoke to mix with the steam, and he relied on the bathroom's ventilation fan to dissipate it. As Carl lit his cigarette, he suddenly heard strange sounds coming from outside his room, resembling a woman humming a tune. Initially, he assumed it was the sound of a neighboring room seeping through the thin walls. However, as Carl continued smoking and listened intently, he realized the sound didn't originate from the adjacent room, but seemed to come from outside his own room. Curiosity piqued, he opened the bathroom door and cautiously stepped out to investigate. To his surprise, there was nobody in the room, and the singing had ceased. After a brief moment of searching, Carl gave up, closed the door, and resumed his shower. As Carl was bathing, the sound of running water made it difficult for him to hear clearly, but he faintly heard the woman singing again. Carl felt puzzled. After finishing his shower and drying himself off, wearing only a bathrobe, he walked into the room to investigate. However, there was still no one in the room, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. When Carl came out dressed in fresh clothes, he sat at the desk and began downloading the photos from his camera onto his computer. Suddenly, he caught a whiff of smoke filling the room. This surprised him because he had already stated that he didn't smoke in the room, he only smoked in the bathroom. There shouldn't have been any smoke lingering in the room. He started to suspect that someone was smoking nearby, as the smell was quite strong, as if someone were smoking right next to him. He decided to step into the bathroom to check if the smoke was wafting from there into the room. However, as he entered the bathroom, he didn't smell any smoke there, only in the room. Simultaneously, as he entered the bathroom, he heard the woman humming her tune again. When Carl stepped out of the bathroom, he was startled to find a woman sitting at his desk, looking at the photos on his computer. The woman was dressed in a very old-fashioned manner, wearing a red cheapao, reminiscent of a film from the 1930s or 1940s. She held a cigarette in her hand, as if the smoke was coming directly from her mouth. At this point, Carl was filled with fear. However, the woman, upon seeing Carl step out of the bathroom, smiled politely and nodded at him, not with an evil grin, but a genuinely courteous gesture. Nonetheless, the situation sent shivers down Carl's spine. He decided to ignore the strange occurrences and hastily left the room. Due to Carl's frequent travels and photography, he had encountered a fair share of unusual situations, and although he felt scared, he didn't let it escalate into panic. He knew how to handle it. His first step was to return to the hotel lobby and request a room change from the front desk. When the front desk staff asked for the reason, Carl explained that the room was filled with intense smoke, even though, in reality, Carl himself was a smoker and had the smell of smoke on him. The staff seemed puzzled and questioned why he chose a smoking floor if he complained about smoke. While the explanation seemed somewhat unreasonable, the hotel, adhering to its customer-oriented policy, arranged a non-smoking room for Carl. Upon learning that a room change was possible, Carl eagerly made the request, asking the front desk staff to send someone to help him with his luggage. Although Carl didn't actually need assistance with his luggage, he simply wanted someone to accompany him into the room to alleviate his fear. When Carl entered the new room, he slowly opened the door, slid in the key card, and the room's lights came on. However, he didn't see the woman anywhere. After putting his belongings back into the suitcase, Carl and the male hotel staff member together moved his luggage to the new room. Carl thought to himself that the problem was finally resolved. He resumed sorting through the day's photos and planning for the next day. Not long after, he started feeling tired and decided to get some sleep. Due to Carl's habit when staying in unfamiliar hotels, he didn't turn off all the lights while sleeping. Apart from switching off the overhead light, he would leave the desk lamp or the bathroom light on as a sense of security. Just as Carl was about to drift off to sleep, he suddenly heard the woman singing again. But as he was already close to falling asleep, he momentarily ignored the sound. However, at the same time, he felt someone blowing smoke near his face. Besides smelling the smoke, he could feel the breath on his face. This terrified him, and he opened his eyes wide, trying to figure out what was happening. He found the woman in the red cheapao crouching next to his bed, holding a cigarette. She once again nodded and smiled politely at Carl, but the gesture only increased his fear. Carl arrived at the hotel lobby and took a seat on the sofa. He contemplated requesting another room change, but he hesitated because he had already switched rooms once, and the woman in the red cheapao had appeared in both rooms. It was evident that the issue wasn't with the rooms themselves. As he sat on the sofa, Carl pondered his options. In the midst of his thoughts, he recollected something. He began to realize that the origin of these occurrences seemed to coincide with his purchase of the antique lighter. He speculated that perhaps the lighter was the source of the problem. However, in the late hours of the night, he didn't want to return to his room. So, he decided to sleep in the lobby and deal with the lighter the next day, hoping that discarding it might alleviate the situation. When Carl woke up, it was the following day, and the sun had already risen. His courage had slightly grown, so he immediately returned to his room to assess the situation. Of course, the woman in the red dress was nowhere to be found. Carl hastily retrieved the lighter from his backpack and placed it on the desk. He began contemplating how to handle the situation with the lighter. He thought that since he was going for breakfast, he could dispose of the lighter in one of the public trash bins along the way, effectively putting an end to it. With this plan in mind, Carl placed the lighter in his pocket and headed to the hotel's restaurant for breakfast. Entering the restaurant, Carl noticed several trash bins near the elevator. He intended to toss the lighter into one of them, but as he took the lighter out, he suddenly heard a woman's voice, sounding just like the ghostly woman from the previous night. She pleaded with Carl not to discard the lighter, explaining that without it, she would be homeless and her fate would become miserable. Carl heard this voice and became certain that the lighter was indeed the problem. However, he began to hesitate once again. Firstly, he didn't want to defy the ghost's wishes as she had made it explicitly clear not to dispose of it. Secondly, he worried that even if he did discard the lighter, the problem might not be resolved and could leave some residual effects. Therefore, he placed the lighter back in his pocket, deciding not to dispose of it just yet. While enjoying his breakfast, Carl contemplated how to handle the lighter properly. He realized he couldn't keep it with him, but he also couldn't simply discard it. He came up with an idea and decided to return the lighter to the vendor at the flea market. After finishing breakfast, Carl returned to his room to change clothes and pack his belongings. He then took the lighter with him and headed out. He made his way to the flea market from the previous day and quickly found the vendor's stall. Carl handed the lighter to the vendor, informing him that he no longer needed it and didn't require a refund. Giving it to the vendor seemed better than wasting it. The vendor smiled at Carl and said, "Did you encounter her too?" Carl paused, surprised that the vendor was aware of the ghost's existence. Carl asked, "Or are you willing to take it back?" The vendor replied, "No problem, but it wouldn't be right to not give you a refund. How about this? Take a look at my stall and see if there's any other item that suits you. If there is, you can exchange it for the second item." After the events of the previous day, Carl had developed some apprehension, and he pondered in his mind, worried that taking a second item might lead to another issue. So he politely declined the vendor's offer and hurriedly left the stall. Since handing over the lighter to the vendor, he never saw the woman in the red cheapao again, and the rest of his journey went smoothly.